Barry, and to kick us off.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Lovely summary there. And we were talking about it before, and it's limited time, so we're trying to be really succinct. So I'm going to be minimalist with my words. And the starting point for all of this is awareness. So if we're not aware, if we're not conscious, we can't make a wise choice, or we can't implement a strategy. It's just habit. So the starting point is mindfulness. A practice of mindfulness is a really good foundation. And I know some of you who have been coming and walking through the mud sessions, and you know about this, but we'll make it really simple. A definition of mindfulness John Kabat-Zinn has is, so it's paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. It's like a little bit of a mouthful, but it's a certain way of paying attention. And we could go into a lot of that, but I find that the way people understand mindfulness most easily is you talk about the opposite of it. So when people start to practice, one of the first realizations they have is, gosh, I am rarely paying attention to what's here in the present moment. And we're in this mode which you could call automatic pilot. So the example that always resonates with people, if you drive, if you don't, the same thing applies to just a regular stroll or walk. If you're driving your car from point A to point B, and you get in and you close the door, turn on the key, and then before you know it, you've arrived at the destination. And that journey was a little bit of a blur. Does that feel familiar to people? Particularly if you're going somewhere new where you're having to really follow a map, you'll be paying attention. But if it's the familiar route, you know this, and you'll drive. You won't crash the car, hopefully. You'll stop at the light. All those things, you're not completely unconscious, but the thing is happening by itself, and we're not giving our full attention to it. So even we could think of other little examples in life of that. When else might that be at play? So maybe your really common one, your breakfast this morning, if you had breakfast, was that tasted and savored, or was it just hoovered in while mind is just doing its own thing? Or communication is very common. So particularly someone who you know quite well, have seen you before, and you know the words might be kind of going back and forth, but you're not really listening. The mind is doing its own thing. And if you're accused of not paying attention, you can say, oh, no, I heard certain words there, but the full awareness, the full attention wasn't brought to it. So if that feels real, it's not something like foreign, it's a very kind of human thing. And then the next thing to kind of understand is, okay, so when we're in that mode, where is our mind wandering to? So you might even for a moment there just kind of ask yourself that question. Okay, when I get into the car and I'm like, where is the tendency? So are you thinking a lot about the future, perhaps? Lots of planning. What's next? Or is there a tendency to relive something from the past? Or are you, imagining a scenario involving yourself? They've done loads of research on this. So when we're in this automatic pilot mode, certain parts of the brain are active. It's the default network, it's along the middle. And the things that we do, all of us, we think about the future, we think about the past, create a sense of self. So it's like, imagining myself in certain scenarios. And then we anticipate problems. So they're all useful things. It's not that this is bad. Mind does this by itself, but it's the amount of time we spend in this mode, which is shocking. When you start to practice it, it's always there. They did one piece of research in 2008, I think, through Harvard, like a biggish group, and they came to the conclusion it's around half the time that we're in that mode. So it's sort of like a recipe for unhappiness in a way, just always anticipating what's to come, what might go wrong, and too much planning. And I think to make it real, I'll give you an example just from my own life. So this was something I noticed a few days ago. I was kind of had the afternoon off, and I was going for a walk in this lovely place in Kiltiernan, and I'd been there before, so it was familiar. And I'm on the management committee of this apartment complex, and the AGM will be coming up, and there's a particular person who is usually a bit difficult, and there's usually like a problem. So before I know it, I'm kind of walking through the Kiltiernan, this nice forest, and then I realized that I'm mentally in a boardroom with this person, like going at it a little, going no, and having this imagined encounter in my mind, anticipating what I might say if something occurs, which might happen or might not happen, and I'm sort of lost in it. It's not a choice or anything. The mind has just done this by itself. And then the practice of mindfulness is so helpful, because it is learning to recognize when the mind drifts, and then we have this moment of awareness and we can bring it back. So it's possible. And I remember years ago, I could stay lost in that stream of thinking for ages, just repetitively falling into it. And this practice gives the ability to recognize it relatively quickly, and then bring your attention. We can always choose what we're going to pay attention to. Like, we could even try it right now for a moment. We can all choose to bring our attention into just noticing this body is sitting here. It's funny, you'd notice your position as well. Are you sort of leaning forward? Is there tension here? And then when you're aware, you sort of can respond. You can maybe just allow the body to give a little bit of its weight to the chair that you're sitting on, feeling your feet on the floor. It's a nice little rest. And as you pause, as you slow down, you just might start to notice how you are, how you're feeling. And then what can be helpful with the practice, we'll do a longer one in the second half, but just working with attention, we can choose maybe to notice that we're breathing. Maybe this is the first conscious breath of the whole day. Something that you can just be in contact with. Sensing the cool air in your nostrils maybe, and the warmer air as you breathe out. Noticing how when you breathe out, there might be a sense of body letting go even a little. And the other thing you notice all the time, the mind will drift. So that's interesting for a moment or two, noticing my breathing. And then before I know it, next thought, oh, what's next, blah, 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 remembering something. And then you just have this moment of awareness, this smile, you go, oh yeah, and I can come back. It's so simple. It's only a few moments, just noticing that ability to choose could move a little or open your eyes if they were closed. We'll have a longer one in a moment. There's one other little thing that I might share. Do I have 3 more minutes, John?
Yeah, absolutely, fire ahead.
Yeah. And this is just something informal that works. So attention, this is what we're working with when we're practicing. And there's only 2 times that we are like really predisposed to pay attention to something. So it's if there's a threat, you know this, if something is dangerous, we naturally zoom in on it, or if something is new. Oh, I've never seen that before, and we'll pay attention. And you can use this. It comes from one of the early psychiatrists, and he'd have the session with the patient, and then on the way, they're obviously suffering a little bit. And after the session, he'd say, okay, on your way home, what I invite you to do is just count the chimney tops. So you normally walk this familiar route and the head might be down, and then we just go into this default network, ruminating and planning and all this stuff. But when you sort of change your perspective and you see the kind of skyline a little, the whole thing looks new. And you are just wired to sort of notice, oh, that's different. I've never seen that before. And it sort of brings you from this default network into mindful awareness of just noticing your environment. And it's really simple, little accessible thing that you could use. Just be on the lookout for novelty, sometimes changing perspective, and notice what that feels like. If the formal practice doesn't sit, then that's something informal that you can try. Is that okay? Makes sense? Yeah.
It's class.
Cool.
What was interesting is when you did the awareness piece, like the first thing I noticed is that I was actually sitting forward on the chair, not using the back of the chair at all. And even just, I don't know how that resonates with people here, but just actually to lean back, just take the weight off myself and my body. And that's that awareness piece, I suppose, that you're...
Yeah, it's noticing you're just like a coiled spring. And then it's like, oh yeah. Just a moment of a break for yourself.
It's fantastic, Barry, and like thank you just for giving us a lovely flavor of what like just to sit with ourselves is like, and really looking forward to in around 10 minutes to having another opportunity to sit with you. I guess in terms of awareness being the theme today, like just to build on what Barry said, each week I'd like to offer you a concept for just a healthy mindset habit. And around awareness, the one that really came to mind for me was to embrace the power of choice when it comes to particularly awareness. So embrace the power of choice is the concept that I wanted to offer today. The power of choice became very much to the fore for me, having read 2 books over the last number of years. The first was a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. The second book was called The Choice by a lady called Edith Eger. So both Edith Eger and Viktor Frankl are survivors of the concentration camp Auschwitz. And what they found in their experience was the same, was that the scenario, the environment, the treatment from the German soldiers was such that it almost took everything away from them, every liberty, every sense of dignity. But what they both found was the one thing that the environment, the situation, the German soldiers simply could not take away from them was their power for them to choose how they felt in a given moment in time. Was the power for them to be able to decide how they perceive what was happening to them. And they both found that gift, that power of choice, had a transformative effect in their ability to withstand the harshness of treatment that they endured, and allowed them to create a sense of hope. And having read those 2 books, what it made me start to just appreciate is, on a given day, you and I have that same power of choice. And on a given day, if you take a step back, the quality of that day, the experience that we have in that day, is hugely influenced by the choices that we make. From what the example Barry used, what we have for breakfast, for what time we decide to go to bed and go to sleep that night. And those 2 choices, and every choice in between, has a huge influence on the quality of that day. And if we take it up a level, if you think about life there's probably going to be a small number of choices that we make around big decisions that will have a huge bearing on the quality of our life, the quality of the experience that we have. And the same applies to that as well. What can we do with those choices? So I guess the first thing really is just embracing the power of it. The second thing I'd like to share is my experience of what is a good choice made up of. And really, this is where it ties back to what Barry has said. For me, a good choice is simply made up of the ability to give yourself time for conscious thought. So to consciously think about, what is the choice I want to make right now? I find within that conscious thought, if you could ask yourself one question to help in that precious space, it would be, what do I need right now? And simply allowing yourself this space just to have time to consciously think about the question, what do I need right now? And then allow your choice to be built around that, for me, can be the foundation of a good choice, which leads to a good day and a good experience. And it sounds so simple in concept. I suppose the question that's worth us sitting and just pausing for a moment just to say is, how often do we give ourselves that space? It might be a moment, it might be a minute of conscious thought to say, hold on a second, John, what do I need right now? And perhaps if it's only for 3 to 5 seconds, if it's only for 10 seconds, just allowing that space and making the choice based on what comes up. So the question I'd ask is, how often do you think you give yourself that space for that moment or that space of conscious thought to make a good choice? I hope you're like me and say that I do it some of the time, but then there's 2 challenges that I find come up that get in the way. And those 2 challenges for me is, one is what Barry has meant, and Barry has touched on both actually. It's autopilot and distraction. For me, are the 2 biggest challenges to using choice and the power of choice. And if I could touch on that breakfast example, just to give you a very simple scenario of how a choice can impact the day, and also how autopilot and distraction can get in the way. So just imagine you came down to your kitchen this morning. Not sure how it happened, but let's just play this scenario out. You come down, and on the table, there's a bowl, there's a jug of milk, and there's a cereal box of cornflakes. And you go down, and perhaps to what Barry said, you're just kind of a little bit in autopilot mode, and you're not really giving conscious thought to what's happening. And you see those 3 things there. There's even a spoon in the bowl as well. So you're kind of going like, okay, I'm not, your mind is elsewhere. God knows what it's thinking about, but you just see all those things. And actually you remember, let's just say it was actually Saturday morning, and then you remember, hold on, John said conscious thought and give yourself space. So I'm going to pause. I'm not going to go straight in there, even though autopilot would suggest everything's there for me. I'll just have cornflakes. And that question, what do I need, comes up. But then the other factor, the radio's on the background, and you get distracted by what the radio DJ is talking about. And all of a sudden you lose that question, and you sit down and you have the bowl of cornflakes. And then what you've realized is you had a really busy morning in store. And particularly just at the end of the morning, there was going to be an interaction with a challenging person. And autopilot and distraction have got in the way. You've had this bowl of cornflakes, when if you'd asked yourself, what do I need? You probably would have come up with conscious thought that I need something substantial. I need something to keep me going all the way till 12 or 1. And come that last interaction, you're now hungry. You're going on low energy because of the choice that you've made. And therefore, you just don't feel your full self in that last conversation. And it turns out going rather poorly. There's a clash, and you can't handle it as well as you can. And now the day is being impacted by the feeling that goes with that. Because back early on in the day, you could not give yourself conscious thought because of autopilot and distraction. Now, that's just one simple example, just to try and bring light to this. What can happen if we do that more often than not is we can create a habit of where choice becomes impacted by autopilot and distraction. And it becomes habitual. And the challenge with that is when we go then to big choices, big life choices, that habitual pattern can impact it there too. And even let's just say, for example, if we had a chance of a job opportunity and we had 3 weeks to think about it, autopilot might mean that we quite often put it to the back burner and say, look, I'm busy today, I'll think about it tomorrow. And tomorrow you're busy again, you say, I'll think about it the next day. And autopilot just keeps just focusing on whatever is going on and not allowing us conscious thought. Or equally, we might get distracted around that decision by what other people tell us we should do around that job opportunity. And instead of us giving ourselves conscious thought, we're distracted by what other people are saying we should do. And these autopilot deferring conscious thought and distractions, what other people say, means that we could go and make a poor choice based on not allowing us give ourselves conscious thought. So for me, the key thing I'd love you to take away from this session around a mindset habit is, how can you this week create space? It might be 5 seconds, it might be a minute, around giving yourself space for conscious thought ahead of a choice and asking that one question: what do I need? And over the next week, if you can try and develop a little bit of a positive habit around that, from awareness, what Barry and I wanted to bring to you today, that can be such a powerful base to the experience you have in a day and to the experience you have of making good life choices. So I'm going to pause now. We have a minute left in the 9 o'clock session. That would be my takeaway, and we'll send a follow-up email. Barry, if in terms of practice from your side, what would you offer? You're on mute there, man. Just to say, what?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the two, informal and formal. So informal is consciously, using that little thing of like novelty that will help you to pay attention, and in an informal practice, just noticing this tendency of the mind to just drift, and that's again a choice point. You can always choose to come back. And then what I have found, and what many others find, is a formal practice. When you do a formal practice, it sort of filters into life. So we'll share some of those with you too, if you would like to try those. And just, maybe what would it be like having a week of begin the day with 10 minutes of meditation or less. We'll give you a little menu so you can, or more, whichever you feel like.
Okay. So for those, we'd encourage everyone, we're going to sit with Barry for a more, in-depth practice just now, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. For those who'd like to join us, brilliant, please stay. For those who need to leave just now, thank you for joining us, and hopefully see you next Friday, and we'll send the email to you later on with the work that we mentioned there. Yes, so you're very welcome. So we'll just pause for a moment and just allow people who need to shoot. Thank you very much, everyone, and those who stay, and we'll get going in just 30 seconds. So just pause for a moment.
There's a little thing I felt like sharing, so I loved that example with the cornflake bowl. Like it's so good. Yeah, and like 99% of the time we just eat the cornflakes. I carving out that space is so helpful. I remember this happened to me when I was first learning about mindfulness, and I was in this kind of busy law firm, and I'd be coming home quite late on the bus, and it's what you're saying there about carving out the space. And I realized, unbeknownst to me, what I used to do, I'd get on the bus and then I'd relive the day in a sort of mildly aggressive way, where I'd be like, I should say this to that guy, and I would have done this differently. And you're sort of like and it's very, very adrenaline-y and not at all what I needed, you know. And then I kind of have these like all this playing out scenarios in my mind, and then I arrive home full of adrenaline and everything. And it was a real shock to me to go, gosh, that's where my mind is going. And it's a real strong habit, but noticing it is the first thing. And then that journey home, even though my life didn't change at all in terms of still busy in work, but that journey home transformed from.
We may have lost Barry, or yeah, okay. And he's in the middle of making what looks to be like a really important point. If you could ever freeze a human being in the middle of what looks like the emphatic point, it would be that pose right there. So in the meantime, we're hoping that Barry does get an opportunity to finish that point. So, okay, do you know, while we're waiting for Barry to come back, I'm going to put two questions into the chat for you. And I'd like you to reflect on these questions for just a moment, okay? Because we will invite you to go into a discussion in just a moment. So the questions that I'm going to put up there now are as follows. What is the biggest distraction that comes to mind to you having listened to what we spoke about? And how does it impact your ability to make good choices? So what is the biggest distraction that comes to mind for you? And how does it impact your ability to make good choices? And then what can you do to consciously counteract its impact in the week ahead? So I'm just going to give you a chance to pause for 2 minutes there and just to sit with that question. And then what we'll do is we'll give you an opportunity to discuss it in groups in just 2 minutes. But just rather than ask you to have to go into that cold, just for 2 minutes, just to reflect on what comes up for you in relation to those two questions. And we might do the group discussion first and allow Barry a chance to come back, and we'll finish with the practice. So just take 2 minutes. Okay, so I'll ask you just to pause your reflection. So we have Barry, we have you back. We were commenting on how you left like this, like you left in the midst of, you know, we all agreed, I think, that was like a profound pose. If someone's going to freeze and have to leave like abruptly, I think you left in the perfect pose moment.
Oh, thanks.
So here's a thought, right? We've just reflected on those two questions in the chat. So we have options. We can go and do a group discussion now with them, or we can do the practice first before we go into the group discussion. What do you reckon?
I'll leave you to make the call, John. Whatever you think would be good.
In the spirit of flow, what we'll do is no, actually, do you know what? We'll do the practice, because
Sure.
it might actually bring up even more in terms of people's response to the questions. So we'll do the practice first.
And let me share this screen with you. So, and hopefully my internet, usually it's reliable. If it dies, you can take over again, John.
Yep.
Sasha is a very experienced mindfulness teacher too. You can do this very easily, Sasha. Oh, I think you've disabled screen sharing for me. It doesn't matter. I can show you with my hands. So when we're practicing mindfulness, we're working with awareness, okay? And it's this ability we have to choose. So I find this flow really helpful. And my first port of call is my body. So it's like step one over here is the body. Often it's like a walking head, completely cut off from the body, like you experienced there, John, of like, oh yeah, my body's here too. And we can settle into our body and just notice what's here. Place for me is my body. And I notice often the tension, and then I can respond a little. And then that's kind of grounding myself. And then the second piece for mindfulness, it's not complicated at all. It's present moment awareness. So it's even right now as we sit, this is informal first. There's the objects that I see, and there's the sounds that I hear, and there's what's going on internally. My sensations in my body are here, and for you too. And your breath is here. Just this moment, different things are here, thoughts in the mind. And so what we do when in the beginning, especially because the mind has this real tendency towards distraction, is we work with an anchor. So there is, I'll suggest the breath. That's really helpful for me as an anchor, just to notice breathing. And you might have a really different experience. You could go, well, for me, a helpful anchor is paying attention to sounds or to feel my feet in the floor. So just knowing you have that flexibility. If I am saying, oh, pay attention to this, and if it's not helpful, go your own way. You can be speaking there and I'll be paying attention to something else. And so we have this anchor that we can kind of maybe gently connect with, sustain attention without forcing, without all this work, just noticing on breathing. And then we'll notice naturally, I'll leave a lot of space in the practice so you can hopefully experience this for yourself. We'll have this, without us even knowing it, the thought slips in, we're sort of carried away a while, maybe analyzing what's going on with the practice, or thinking about what's next, just some thought. And then the most important bit is this moment of noticing, of remembering. And when I show it in the diagram, so we have our body, we have present moment awareness, we have then this with an anchor, then we have this mind wandering, not my choice, just lost for a while. And then I use a smiley face because it's so easy to be harsh and to be cross and go, God, for God's sake, back. And what we're doing, what we're invited to, is really congratulate ourselves. Go, oh yeah, well done. This is part of it. I'm learning to notice where my mind goes, I'm learning to kind of recognize it. And then very slowly, I can just land back as you can right now into the body. Notice like what's changed. The body can settle again a little. And then reconnect with your anchor. This just repeats. Very simple. So I'd invite you, we'll do a little practice, and again, I won't guide it that much, just so you can have the space to see for yourself. So we could sit in a way that's relaxed and alert, those two things. And maybe your feet on the floor. And I learned to practice with my eyes closed, but if you prefer to open them, again, just really flexible with whatever you need. Maybe your hands rest somewhere on your lap or wherever feels supportive. And we begin with just an intentional pause, not needing to rush. And that brings us into contact with this moment. things might start to become a little more vivid. The sounds that are happening and what's going on in the body and the mind. Just pausing. And then there could be just choosing to connect to the body. Can you feel your feet on the floor right now and your bum on the chair? Something very real and tangible there that we can be in contact with. Wiggling your toes if you need to, just to feel your feet. And then we can gather attention and connecting with something so simple, hardly ever pay attention to it. So maybe right now noticing that you're breathing. Could be curious. Where can you feel the breath? Nostrils or abdomen? Cool air, warm air. This could be the anchor right now. And without forcing anything, it's just something we can be in contact with, knowing we're breathing. Enjoying breathing. Some days it's easy, we can be in contact and we can be steady, and then other days it might be that there's restlessness or that the mind is busy. Just noticing that as well. Oh yeah, this is what's happening. My mind is drifting, planning, analyzing, judging. And in any moment when you remember, it's a moment of awareness. And you can just very kind of kindly, gently come back to your body. This body is sitting here. Noticing what's happened in the body or what's happening right now. Maybe allowing the body to settle again. And then no rush or not worrying about what's next. Just maybe connecting in again with your anchor. Noticing the sensations of this breath. Other things might be there in the background as well, but we can have this as a support. Maybe just for a moment or two, opening a little bit more and sensing again your feet on the floor, and the backs of your legs on the chair. Maybe opening to a sense of your whole body. The whole body is just sitting here. Maybe sensing the weight of the body. Whole body breathing. And then again, it's curious, adrift sometimes, noticing that thought slips in unbeknownst to us, and then we're carried away, and then we can recognize and just come back. Yeah, an attitude of kindness for ourselves. And then again, it's just a short little practice, maybe some taste of what it's like. We could maybe bring a little bit of conscious movement in, your fingers or your toes, or a little sigh. What do I need? Movement would feel helpful. And then when you're ready, the eyes might gently open if they were closed.